silent for years and years and years.
I love how you talk about knowing the difference between those two kinds, actually, because I
Yeah.
talk about that the same with fear. There's different kinds of fear. There is the survival kind, and you do what you need to do. But then there's this other kind, and that's, that this little saying came from one of Elizabeth Gilbert's blogs. Your fear is boring. That kind of fear that I think is boring is kind of that tolerating stuff where you're just trying to avoid the stuff that's really going to actually be life-changing if you could just learn how to face it and move through it, right?
Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing, and
No.
it's baby steps, and and so I, in the book, really just bring people through these series of questions they can ask themselves. And so they can just even work on one thing. Like, what am I, who or what am I in my life tolerating? Like, that's a simple question. And probably anyone who hears that question goes, bam, him, her, this, her, that, job, whatever. The guy at the grocery store that is, doing this to me every time I go, whatever it is, like, there's always going to be one thing. So that gives you the shift of awareness of what tolerance is for you. And then once you make that shift of what you're tolerating, you start to say, I can't tolerate this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I can't put up with this anymore.
I love that question. I love the big questions that are so simple, but they change everything. Love them.
Because my saying, and I take this from I'm a Survivor fan, the television show. And one of the things that happened on the show is I remember the host, Jeff, says, well, you can't unring the bell. And once you answer your questions to yourself, you can't unring them. Like, you know them, and then they creep in, and you're like, but I really shouldn't be tolerating this,
Yeah, they won't leave you alone at that point. That's like, once you have the awareness, you can't really get rid of it. It's not a bad thing, but you better get ready for the
changes that are about to come. Yeah,
totally.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
So, okay. So, I don't know, maybe you'll tie this into the tolerance topic or not, but tell me how detached, and I know, my goodness, I got my own thoughts about it, but tell me how detaching from drama is going to help us on this journey.
Oh gosh, if there was a magic wand that could detach us from drama, I would have invented it, and I would be in the Bahamas right now.
I'll be there with you.
Some people I have found literally live for drama, and there's always something wrong every day. It's kind of like the Debbie Downer syndrome. It's like you get into the restaurant and you're like, it's such a sunny day. Yeah, but the allergies are bad. It's like, there's always that person so the drama detachment for me was when I was in the crux of what was going on, what I felt was going on for me. Like, at the time, I really wasn't ready to even take responsibility for my part of it, which we all know there's always two sides, was that I was keeping the story going because I was talking about it all the time. And I was like, everybody that came, I wanted to talk about it and get them to rally around me and and till one day, this beautiful lady said to me, I remember when that was my truth. And, somebody said to me, we're tired of hearing about it. And she said, I had realized that they had moved on and I hadn't. And I remember when she said that to me, I was like, bam, like, I'm the only person keeping this drama going. I'm the only person who wakes up every day and says, oh my God, poor me. And at that moment, I was just like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I don't need to have drama in my life. Drama's going to come, and I can put it where it needs to be and I can solve it, but I don't need to relive it every single day. So for me, the drama detachment became more about just saying, is this my stuff or is this his stuff? Is this, and if it's his stuff, it's not mine. And I can that's not my chapter. That's not my book. I'm not writing that story. I only am responsible for what's here with me. And once I could do that, then I was able to detach. I also spent many, many days, in even right now, really putting that invisible bubble around me. And in my meditation, just saying, I'm going out in the world today, and I only want to, meet people with kindness and compassion. And that's all I want back to me. But if I do enter into some serene where I'm triggered, then please protect me from that. And so that doesn't always work because we're always triggered, and you're going to be triggered until you're not triggered anymore by certain things in your life. But you have to kind of have that shield of protection and say, is this worth it? Is this worth my emotional upheaval? Is this worth my grief that's going to come from beyond this drama? And what can I do to sort of solve this drama?
Is this worth it is another one of those simple, powerful questions, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So, even in these few minutes, we've already talked about several really powerful tools people can use. And I was just sitting here thinking, okay, you and I have made a practice out of this in our lives, and not everybody listening is going to feel like this is so easy. What would you say is the number one tool? If you only had to pick one to start people off on the baby steps with, what would it be?
One thing.
It's hard, I know.
Well, I think that I would start with joy, because I would start with figuring out like three things. I'm sorry. Self-love, self-forgiveness, and joy.
Yeah.
And the joy and the self-love kind of go together.
They do.
Because if you're doing something that makes you happy, it's kind of like when you love somebody, and you go and you bring them a present, or you take them shopping. Like my daughter, I'll take her on a shopping spree. That's because I love her. And so if I take myself on that shopping spree, then I'm giving myself that same love that I would give someone else. So I think that as we start giving each other self-love, and we start, giving ourselves self-love, and we start realizing that we're just as important as everybody else, that starts to give you the strength to stand up for yourself. It starts giving you the strength for knowing what's true for yourself. It starts giving you the strength to say no to people. And so I think that self-love, and I say self-love, the joy, and then self-forgiveness. And I think that self-forgiveness is probably the biggest piece of this whole puzzle that I've only recently really realized, is that I've carried so many situations in my life that I may have regretted, things I said, things I've done, that there was a great deal of shame around me. And once I was able to say and learn, and I work with a Ho'oponopono forgiveness coach who is my co-host on Best Life Cafe, and she'll give me these exercises, and I'll really have to forgive myself for the mistakes I've made, for the choices I've made, and then say, but that was yesterday. So now I get to say, I forgive myself for that. I forgive the people involved, because we're all just people doing the best we can. Like, I get it. Sometimes that you don't always like what people do, but I get that we're all on our own personal journey. So I think those three things, just keeping the joy and self-love going, and forgiving yourself, and don't beat yourself up anymore. Like, let it go. Drop the orange.
I think attaching to the past mistakes is actually very similar to attaching to drama. Yeah. It has no real value for you in the present moment, especially if you are after the joy. So every time you think about those things, you just shower yourself with the self-forgiveness, the compassion, and realize the present moment self isn't all that. And you don't need to attach to any of it anymore, really. It can be very simple.
Well, one of the things that I just recently I know I've learned this before, but I had my life coach say to me, she said, even when you're in the muck of your life, maybe you're in a dramatic situation, or maybe something's going on that you're like, I can't bear this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And so you sit in that drama, and you sit in it because it's absorbing your life every day. She said, even though you still have to take a baby step to move your life forward every day. So I could be sitting in the crux of this horrible thing happening to me, but I'm still going to get up and write my blog, because I have to move myself forward. And when she said that, I really had this like epiphany where I thought, even if it's just one thing, even if it's doing a podcast, even if it's just doing one thing towards where my mission and my platform and my, I feel like my mission in life is to talk about abuse, and it is to talk about emotional abuse and verbal abuse, because it's a very untapped area. We have a lot of different areas that have come to surface, but nobody talks about emotional abuse or verbal abuse and what it does to you. It's very silent violence. And so I feel like that has been my platform. So I have to sort of learn how to unwind it for other people as well.
Ooh, emotional abuse is silent violence. I'm going to make a quote poster for you on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I actually at one time, I had started a Twitter page called Silent Violence, and I just never really took it where I needed to go. But because I've heard recently, from so many people who have been in situations either in the workplace or in the home or in the areas where they think, it's silent, like there's no marks, there's no bruises, there's no doctor's appointments where you can make sure this happened to you. Like there's nothing that says this is happening. It's very silent. And the victim of that has to sit in it. And that's why I was having panic attacks. And that's why I had post-traumatic stress, because all the abuse in my life, and I have in my book, I talk a little bit about some of the abusive relationships that I have been in the past. And I have to unravel why I allowed that too, so there was been a piece for me now that I'm working on where I'm like, well, why did I allow someone to talk to me that way? Why did I tolerate that? And that was me in my defense mechanism. So, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of reasons why we do what we do, but
and
we have to speak up.
You're talking this whole process is what I call brave healing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole journey, right? Okay. So listen, I read something on your website and I don't know, we may have already talked about it. So you'll just have to move me along to the next question if we have already covered it, but you kind of teased us and you said that there was a tweet that you mentioned about the fact that life had to change. I want to hear about that story. What was that?
So that story, goosebumps. That was really the pivotal moment that I got the message. So, I can't go into super details because of legal reasons, but I basically was sitting at my desk on probably my 25th anxiety attack, where I literally would go into my office, and this is known, where I would breathe in a bag and because I would start to hyperventilate into the panic attack. And so I closed the door and I would go on Twitter, because Facebook, I had my family and my friends, but on Twitter, nobody knew me. So I could kind of go on Twitter and just like write whatever I felt like that I didn't think anyone in my life would ever read. So this particular day, I was sitting in my office. I was crying. Like, I'll get emotional just talking about it because I'll never forget the day. And I had been told I was incompetent and I was old, and he was screaming at me and just telling me horrible things about my work ethic and that weren't true. So I sat down and I wrote, I don't know how I'm going to live, ... And then I sat there and this voice, just literally, when I probably met my higher wisdom power for the first time, said, Cathy, if you had 6 months to live, would you be living your life this way? And then I wrote, #, I only know how I'm not going to live. And it was in that moment that I started standing up for myself against the abuse in the workplace.
Wow.
There were still other places in my life that I wasn't standing up for that, but that moment. And then I really went on a healing journey from that moment on. And it was about a year. I tolerated it for another year after that, but I was journaling the whole time, which is what made the difference for me, is that I would write down all my feelings and all the things that were going on. And that kind of helped me cope with it. But so that happened. And then about a year later, when I finally stood up and said, that's enough, is when kind of the whole thing fell apart and I got fired.
Wow. I'm so glad I asked that question. And of course, well, I don't know if you know this about me, but writing as a path to healing is my shtick. Yeah. So using journaling as a healing tool is real and powerful. Oh my goodness. I loved hearing you tell that story. There was so much energy in just listening to you say those words about that moment. And this is so perfect to kind of move into this next question about it, because I turned 50 this year, and I totally understand what you mean by getting into the mindset if I only had 6 months to live. The older you get, the more you think life is short. But listen, even at 50, this can be difficult to sustain. And it's the idea of sustaining the mindset, right? And I wish I could go up to every 20-year-old and make them feel this way and think this way from, the get-go. But so it's easy to get into the habit of your old habit